Look at the corner of your screen. There's a number there, the time. You've probably checked it a dozen times today without even deciding to. You glance at it on your phone, your wrist, your car, your microwave, the corner of every device you own. The exact minute, always there, always waiting. But that number is one of the strangest things we have ever done to ourselves. For almost the entire story of our species, no one knew what time it was, not because they were primitive, not because they were lazy, but because the question simply did not exist. There was no minute, there was no 8:47, there was no being late, no being early, no running out of time. Those ideas had not been invented yet. For over 300,000 years, every single one of your ancestors lived without a clock. They woke, worked, ate, loved, and died without once knowing the hour. And they didn't feel like something was missing. To them, life wasn't measured in minutes. It was measured in something we have almost completely forgotten how to feel. So how did they live without time? How did they plan, meet, hunt, and survive with no way to count the hours? The answer is stranger than you'd think. And it reveals something about the modern mind that most people never stop to notice. Let's start with the truth that's hard to swallow. The relentless, ticking, second-by-second time you live inside is not natural. It is not how humans experience the world for almost all of our existence. It's a recent invention, and a strange one. And to understand how strange, you have to understand what time meant before the clock. For your ancestors, time wasn't a line. It was a circle. Everything that mattered came back around. The sun rose and set, rose and set. The moon swelled and shrank and swelled again. Cold seasons gave way to warm ones, then back to cold. Animals migrated, returned, migrated again. Berries appeared, then vanished, then appeared once more the following year. Life was a wheel of repeating events, and you didn't count the wheel. You simply lived inside its turning. This isn't a guess. Anthropologists who have studied the few remaining hunter-gatherer societies on Earth have found this same pattern again and again. Many traditional cultures don't have words for abstract units of time the way we do. They mark events instead. Not in 3 hours, but when the shadows grow long. Not next month, but when the rains come. Not I am 34 years old, but a life understood through the seasons it has passed through. Think about what that means. Your ancestors didn't ask what time it is. They asked what was happening. And the sky told them everything they needed to know. The sun was the first clock, and for most of history, the only one that mattered. When it climbed, you rose with it. When it stood high overhead, the day was at its peak. When it sank, the world began to close. People could read the position of the sun with astonishing accuracy, judging the hour by the length and direction of a shadow, the warmth on their skin, the angle of light through the trees. They didn't need a number, they had the entire sky, and at night when the sun was gone, they had something even greater. They had the stars. This is something almost no modern human can truly imagine. For your ancestors, the night sky was not a faint scattering of dots. It was a vast, glittering map, so bright and so detailed that it functioned as a calendar, a compass, and a clock all at once. Specific stars rose at specific times of year. The appearance of certain constellations told people when to plant, when to migrate, when the floods were coming, when the cold would arrive. The sky was a timepiece that hung over every human who ever lived, and they knew how to read it the way you know how to read words. The ancient Egyptians watched for the star Sirius. When it first reappeared in the dawn sky after months of absence, they knew the Nile was about to flood, the single most important event in their entire agricultural year. Their survival was timed to a star. Across the world, in completely separate cultures who never met, people built their lives around the same glittering clock above them. Polynesian navigators crossed thousands of miles of open ocean using the stars as their guide, with no instruments, no maps, nothing but the sky and a memory passed down through generations. But here's the part that changes everything. The first real attempt to chop time into pieces didn't come from farmers or sailors or scientists. It came from a much stranger place. It came from prayer. In medieval Europe, monasteries needed their monks to pray at fixed points throughout the day and night, not when they felt like it. Not when the sun looked right. At precise regular intervals, even in the dead of night, even in winter when the sun barely showed itself. This created a problem nobody had ever truly faced before. How do you wake a sleeping building full of people at exactly the right moment, over and over, with perfect consistency, when the sun isn't there to tell you? The answer they built would go on to reshape the entire human mind. They built the mechanical clock. The first mechanical clocks appeared in European monasteries around the late 1200s. They didn't even have faces or hands at first. They simply rang a bell. The word clock itself comes from the medieval Latin and French words for bell. Its only job was to summon the monks to prayer. It was a religious tool. But it carried a hidden power that no one understood at the time. For the first time in human history, time had been separated from the sky. Think about how enormous that is. Every clock before this one had been tied to nature. Sundials needed the sun. Water clocks and hourglasses tracked the flow of the day. But this new machine didn't care about the sun at all. It ticked the same in darkness as in daylight, the same in summer as in winter. It created a kind of time that existed entirely on its own, an artificial time, a time made by humans, for humans, that owed nothing to the turning world. And once that machine existed, it didn't stay in the monasteries, it escaped. By the 1300s, towns across Europe were building great clock towers in their central squares. The bell that once called monks to prayer now called everyone to everything. The clock became the heartbeat of the town. And slowly, without anyone deciding it, the way humans thought about time began to change. People started organizing their lives not around what was happening, but around what the bell said. Markets opened by the bell. Work began by the bell. The day was no longer a flowing thing shaped by the sun. It was being cut into pieces. But the truly radical change, the one that rewired us completely, came later. It came with the minute hand. For centuries, even mechanical clocks only tracked the hour. The minute, as a thing people actually paid attention to, barely existed for ordinary life. Minute hands didn't become common on clocks until around the 1600s. And the second hand came even later. Think about that. For the overwhelming majority of human history, no one had any reason to think about a single minute, let alone a single second. These slices of time that now rule your entire life are shockingly new inventions. And then came the machine that finished the job, the factory. This is where the story turns dark. When the Industrial Revolution arrived in the 1700s and 1800s, it brought something humanity had never experienced before. Time became money, literally. Workers were no longer paid for what they produced or for a task completed. They were paid for their time, hours of it. And so the factory owners needed those hours measured, controlled, and obeyed. The factory clock was born. Workers clocked in and clocked out. Bells and whistles sliced the day into shifts. Being late meant losing wages or losing your job entirely. For the first time, masses of ordinary people were forced to synchronize their bodies to a machine on the wall, not to the sun, not to the seasons, not to their own hunger or exhaustion or natural rhythm, to a mechanical dial that did not care whether they were tired, whether it was dark, whether their body wanted to rest. This was the moment the clock stopped serving us and we started serving the clock, and it kept tightening. In 1884, the world did something that would have been unthinkable to every human who came before. Representatives from around the globe gathered and agreed to divide the entire planet into standardized time zones. Suddenly, noon was no longer the moment the sun stood highest over your own head. It was a number agreed upon by committee, shared across hundreds of miles, the same for a person standing in a sunlit field, and a person who couldn't see the sun at all. Time was completely severed from the sky and handed over to the machine. The clock had conquered the earth itself. So what did this do to us? What happens to a creature that evolved for 300,000 years inside a circle of seasons and then suddenly gets strapped to a straight, ticking line? Here is what the science suggests, and it should make you sit up. Your body still runs on the old clock. Buried deep in your brain is a tiny cluster of cells that controls your circadian rhythm, your internal 24-hour cycle. This ancient timer was built by the sun over millions of years. It tells your body when to release hormones, when to feel sleepy, when to feel alert, when to grow hungry. It does not know what a clock is. It only knows light and dark. And right now, for most modern humans, it is in a constant, quiet war with the artificial time we've imposed on it. When your alarm drags you out of deep sleep in the dark because a number says it's time, you are overriding hundreds of thousands of years of biology. When you eat lunch because the clock says noon, not because you're hungry, you are obeying the machine over your own body. Researchers have a growing body of evidence linking this clash, this mismatch between our internal time and our imposed clock time, to a startling range of modern problems: disrupted sleep, anxiety, the strange, constant, low-level sense that there is never enough time. And that feeling, that breathless sense of time running out, may be the strangest cost of all, because your ancestors almost certainly never felt it. You cannot run out of a circle. A wheel doesn't end, but a line does. The moment we turn time into a line that ticks forward second by second, never returning, we invented a brand new kind of dread. The feeling of time slipping away, the feeling of falling behind, the feeling that the hours are escaping faster than you can use them. No human felt that for almost all of our existence. It is, in a very real sense, a modern invention. We didn't just build a clock. We built a new way of suffering. There's an experiment that shows just how deep the old time still runs in us. In studies where volunteers were placed in environments with no clocks, no sunlight, no way at all to track the hour, something remarkable happened. At first they were lost. But within days, their bodies began to settle into a natural rhythm all on their own. They slept, woke, and grew hungry in steady cycles without any machine telling them to. The ancient clock was still there, buried under a lifetime of alarms and schedules, waiting. It had never actually left. We had just stopped listening to it. This is the part that should stop you. Your ancestors weren't missing something because they had no clocks. They had access to a way of experiencing time that you have almost completely lost. A life lived in the present moment, shaped by the world around them rather than a number ticking in their pocket. They were not always checking how much time was left because the question made no sense. The day was not a countdown. It was simply the day. And we traded that for a number in the corner of a screen. So how did we get here? How did a species that once read the sky like a book end up flinching at an alarm every single morning, racing against a machine, haunted by the feeling that we are always, somehow, running late? The answer in the end is simpler than you'd guess. We built the clock to serve us, and then, so slowly that no single generation noticed it happening, we handed it the throne. The bell that once called monks to peace became the alarm that jolts you awake in fear. The tower that organized a town became the schedule that organizes your entire existence. We invented a tool to measure the day, and the tool quietly redefined what a day is, what a life is, what it even means to have enough time. That glance you give the clock 100 times a day. That tightening in your chest when you realize you're behind. That low hum of anxiety that there are never enough hours. We treat it as just part of being alive, as normal, as the unavoidable price of a modern life. But what if it isn't normal at all? What if that anxiety is the sound of a circle being forced into a line? The sound of an ancient creature, built for seasons and stars, straining against a machine it was never designed to obey. For 300,000 years, your ancestors lived without ever once knowing the hour, and they did not feel poor for it. They woke to light spilling over the horizon and slept when the dark grew deep. They read the sun off the length of a shadow and the year off the rising of a star. They moved through their days like water following a slope, pulled along by hunger and weather and the great turning wheel of the seasons, never racing a number, never falling behind, never running out. They knew time the way we never will, not as an enemy chasing them down, not as a thread growing shorter, but as a circle that always came back around. As the sun that would rise again, the moon that would return, the cold that would melt into warmth again and again for as long as the world kept turning. We traded all of that for a number in the corner of a screen. And most of us never even noticed when it took over.